أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه العبد المؤيد والرسول المسدد، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته المنتجبين. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله، صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا ابن رسول الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة، ويا باب نجاة الأمة، ويا عبرة كل مؤمن ومؤمنة، يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها، قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. We human beings are three-dimensional. We have three dimensions to ourselves. The first dimension is our bodies. We as human beings, we own bodies. And this dimension of ours is very crucial to us. We spend most of our wealth and money and time and energy on our bodies. We will spend money on the most expensive clothing, on the most expensive shoes. Some people will refuse to wear anything that is non-designer. It has to be a name brand or a brand name. How much money do we spend on food and drinks? This all goes back to the body. How much do we spend paying to the gym? That's if we go to the gym and actually exercise. We pay enormous amounts to a gym just to exercise and be fit and to have a body that's fit. This goes back to the body. We spend so much just for our bodies. We spend so much time. There are some people that are willing to wake up at 6 in the morning to go for a jog to lose some extra weight, spend an hour to jog or go to the gym and lose weight, but they're not willing to spend an hour for the sake of Allah. They're not willing to give an hour for the service of their community, but they're willing to spend an hour each day, 7 hours a week on their bodies to look fit, to look good. There's some people that spend a lot of money on haircuts or a hairstylist. This all goes back to the body. This is the first dimension. The second dimension for us human beings is our mind and our brain. Our minds and our brains, also we spend a lot of time, money, efforts and energy on our minds and our brains. How many years do we spend in school? At least 12 grades in grade school. And then for those that go on to a university, that's another 4 years. For those that do their master's degree, that's another maybe 2 years. Those who do their PhD, that's another 4 years, and so on and so forth. At least a minimum for those that wish to advance and reach a good level, a minimum of 20 years to 22 years of studying. There are those that kill themselves in order to get into top universities. They might get very little of sleep just to get into a top university, into a high-ranking university. And they'll spend thousands of dollars at that university, if it's a private university. Why? Only to enhance their mind and their brain. So that people will say, this is Dr. so-and-so. To receive a title, to receive a degree. We'll spend time and money on our minds and brains. These are two dimensions. And there's a third dimension to us human beings. There's a third dimension that's neglected, that's ignored. And that dimension is our nafs, our soul, our spirit. This nafs, this dimension is equally as important as the first and the second. In fact, it's even more important. Yet, this dimension, this third dimension, our nafs, it's neglected. It's ignored. Even though it also needs nourishment. It also requires food. But we don't give it its nourishment. We pay attention when the body needs nourishment and food, we provide it. But not the nafs. Not the nafs. Even though the nafs is a very dangerous dimension in ourselves. We see, my dear friends, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. These three dimensions, they work as the following. The body is like a vehicle. The body doesn't have any major significance in our lives. It doesn't make decisions. The body doesn't make decisions. The body is like a car. You tell your car where you want to go. Your car doesn't tell you where it wants to go. You sit in the car, sit behind the wheel, and you decide where you want to go. You want to come and listen to a lecture, that's up to you. You want to go to a bar and get drunk, knock yourself out. It's all up to you. The body doesn't make any decisions. The other two dimensions, the brain, the mind, it can decipher what is good from what is bad. Your mind tells you, our mind tells us that praying is a good thing. Communicating with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a good thing, it's healthy. Worship is good. A life without worship is unhealthy, it's unstable. The brain tells you this. The brain tells you that it's healthy to communicate with God. That it's good to establish a communication with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why do some people go through depression? Why is depression today the worst form of disease in our communities? Wherever you go, people are diagnosed with depression. Why is it that millions of people every year, they decide to take away their lives? I read a report that in the United States of America, annually 20 million people attempt suicide, attempt to take away their lives. And 1 million of them actually succeed and take away their lives. 1 million. Out of a population of 300 million. 1 million people take away their lives annually. Why is that? It's because of this illness of depression. Right now in the West, the most popular drug, the most popular medicine, if you go to the pharmacy, and I know we have pharmacists in our crowd tonight in the audience, the most popular medicine is what form of medicine? Antidepressants. According to some statistics, it's antidepressants. Prozac. It's one of the most famous and well-known and on-demand medicine and drugs out there. Why? Why is it that in the West people go through depression? It's because they've neglected a dimension in themselves. They've kept it hungry. They've kept it malnourished, malnutrition. They're not feeding their souls and their spirits and their nafs. Their brain tells them that you're in need of worship, yet they neglect it. We have a struggle. In ourselves, there's a struggle between our brain, our mind, that can decipher what is good from what is bad. Our brain tells us that it's good to fast during Ramadan, that it's good to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it's good to help the poor and help the needy. It is good to help the elderly and the disabled in the community. And on the other hand, you have a nafs. The nafs is rebellious. The nafs, of course, if it's not taken care of, it becomes rebellious. If it's not taken care of, it's rebellious. I remember a couple of years ago, a long time ago, when we were in the United States of America, when I was living in Los Angeles. My father and a couple of members in the community, they bought a school with the help of some benefactors. They bought a school for Muslim students from preschool up to 12th grade. The school was under construction, and every day there were thieves breaking in and stealing stuff from the construction site. So what we had to do was, we bought a dog, we bought a canine, a German Shepherd. We bought a German Shepherd, and we put it in the school, and the thieves stopped. But the problem was, with this German Shepherd, was that it wasn't tamed, it wasn't disciplined. And one day, we had another guard, we had a guard, a human being, a guard at the school. One day the canine attacked this man. He attacked him and he bit him to the point that he had to spend an entire week at the hospital. Why? Because this canine wasn't tamed. It wasn't disciplined. This canine, or this German Shepherd, it's a weapon. It's a very destructive weapon. But it depends on how you use it. If you tame it, if you discipline it, you can use it against your enemies. It can be used against foreign agents. But if you don't tame it and discipline it, it will turn against whom? Against yourself. It will turn back and attack you because you haven't tamed it and disciplined it. Our nafs is the same. Our nafs, if we discipline it and we tame it, we give it the proper nourishment, this nafs will help us become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This same nafs will help us become closer to Allah. And if the nafs is not tamed and not disciplined, this nafs will turn against us and will lead us to hellfire. The Quran says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. He who learns how to discipline his nafs and himself, tame it. A person who learns to make his nafs an obedient nafs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this person will succeed. And a person who lets his nafs wild, chooses to do whatever it wants, then this person will lose. This person will lose. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala. In a hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states that or hadith by the Ahlul Bayt, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created two creations. Or rather, three creations. Allah created animals, humans, and angels. In animals, He gave them desire, but without a brain, without logic. Animals have brains, but not logic. And with angels, it's the opposite. He gave them logic and a mind, a rational mind, but without desires. And with humans, He gave them both desires and logic. And then the hadith says that if a human being, he allows his brain and logic to overcome his desires, he becomes greater than whom? Than angels. But if he lets his desires overcome his logic and brain, he becomes worse than animals. أولئك كالأنعام بل هم أضل سبيلا. There are some human beings that are worse than animals. They are worse than animals. We see in our everyday life. Look at the barbarians today in Iraq. There's civilians out on the street. Innocent civilians, children, women that have no crime. He'll come and put a car bomb and kill 50 people. Isn't this person worse than an animal? Perhaps even an animal might break his heart might break and might not attack his prey. Might not attack his prey. But there are some human beings that are worse than animals. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa Our nafs needs to be tamed, my dear brothers and sisters. Our nafs requires nourishment. Why is it that every day we have 3 meals? Can a person skip his meals? No. You wake up in the morning, the first thing that you have to do is have breakfast. I don't think anyone leaves the house without breakfast. We don't forget it. And when lunchtime comes, we have to have our lunch, a proper lunch. It has to be warm, it has to be good, it has to be fulfilling. If our lunch is delayed 1 hour, we go crazy. We start shouting, we start yelling, because we're not fed. At night, we have to have our dinner. It's impossible that we forget our meals. A person forgets an appointment, he forgets to do his homework, he goes late to work, but you never see a person who has a late lunch. His lunch has to be on time because he has to feed his body. He cares for his body. But our nafs, we neglect it. We neglect our nafs and the nourishment of our nafs. Our nafs requires a nourishment. It requires to be fed. The salah that we perform every day, this feeds our nafs. The salah. Even if it's a couple of minutes. But if we pay attention and concentrate to our salah, the salah, it feeds our souls. It feeds our nafs. It brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But a salah that we pay attention to, not a salah that we ignore and neglect. For most of us, our salah is a routine. We do it because we have to do it. Because if we don't do it, we're taught that Allah will throw us into hellfire. That's the only reason. The only reason is to avoid punishment from Allah. That's it. If we were told that Allah says there's no punishment, if you want to pray, you could pray. If you don't want to pray, you don't have to pray. Who will remain praying? Who will remain praying? We only do it because we're afraid of hellfire. That's if we're afraid of hellfire. There's people that are not afraid of hellfire. But this form of prayer, Amir al-Mu'mineen calls it, it's the prayer of whom? Of whom? Of slaves. Of slaves. This is servitude. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, أَنَّ قَوْمًا عَبِدُوا اللَّهَ طَمَعًا فِي جَنَّتِهِ وَتِلْكَ عِبَادَةُ الْفُجَّارِ. Those who pray because they want heaven, these are merchants. They're businessmen. They tell Allah, I do this, well you have to do this for me. If you don't do this, I won't do this. Like children. Have you seen children that do things for free? You tell your child, do this, and I reward you. وَإِنَّ قَوْمًا عَبِدُوا اللَّهَ خَوْفًا مِنْ نَارِهِ وَتِلْكَ عِبَادَةُ الْعَبِيدِ. And there are those that worship Allah because they are afraid of His hellfire. And these guys are slaves. This worship is a worship of slaves. They only do it because they're afraid of hellfire. If Allah tells them there's no hellfire, no one does it. Let the President of Australia, let the local government announce that all the policemen in the country are taking a week vacation. What will happen in this country? What will happen? Do you feel safe to drive out in the street? Do you even feel safe staying at home? Absolutely not. People will be breaking laws. There's police now and there's people breaking laws. Imagine if there was no police and if there was no jail. Imagine how much laws would be broken. وَإِنَّ قَوْمًا عَبِدُوا اللَّهَ حُبًّا أَوْ شُكْرًا لَهُ وَتِلْكَ عِبَادَةُ الْأَحْرَارِ. And there are those that don't worship Allah out of interest and advantage, out of interest in His heaven, nor out of fear of His hellfire, but there are those that feel Allah is worthy of being worshipped. He's worthy of being worshipped. فَتِلْكَ عِبَادَةُ الْأَحْرَارِ. This is the worship of someone who's free, not someone who has interest and has fears. And Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says, إلهي ما عبدتك طمعا في جنتك ولا خوفا من نارك ولكن وجدتك أهلا للعبادة فعبدتك. Oh Allah, I didn't worship you because I want your heaven, nor because I'm afraid of your hell, but because I found you worthy of being worshipped, so I worshipped. Why don't we start working on our nafs, my dear brothers and sisters? Our nafs requires a lot of work. And I speak for myself before I speak to you. My nafs requires a lot of work. My nafs requires a lot of discipline, a lot of taming. إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةً بِالسُّوءِ. Our nafs, if we don't tame it, it will drag us to hellfire. It will drag us to hell. Our nafs knows our weaknesses. And it will come to our weaknesses. What is our weakness? Oh, we'll be tested through that weakness. As I mentioned before. We mentioned in our lectures. But not the believers. The mu'mineen, they have their nafs under control. A mu'min makes sure that his logic and brain overcomes his nafs, and not the other way around. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says, في خطبة المتقين, in a sermon in which he describes the pious, when one of his companions by the name of Humam comes to him and he says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, صف لي المتقين. Describe to me how the pious are. Amir al-Mu'mineen saw that this person can't handle it. He says, Ya hada, ittaq Allah wa kun ma'a as-sadiqin. Be pious, have piety, and be with the truthful. But Humam kept on insisting. He wanted to know how the pious are. He wanted to know the qualities of the pious. Amir al-Mu'mineen started mentioning the qualities of the pious one by one. Over 100 qualities. Over 100 qualities. It's mentioned in Nahj al-Balagha. When Amir al-Mu'mineen finished, the hadith says, فَصَعِقَ صَعْقَ وَسَقَطَ وَمَاتَ. Humam shouted, he screamed, and he fell and he died. He died. He couldn't handle it. And then Amir al-Mu'mineen pointed to him and he said, هَكَذَا تَفْعَلُ الْمَوَاعِظْ بِأَهْلِهَا. When a true admonishment, when true advice is given to a person worthy of advice, this is what happens to him. He falls like this. Shame on us. Shame on us. We hear so much words of admonishment and advice and it doesn't affect us. It goes in through one ear and goes out through the other. We hear of so many people dying. It never affects us. We always think that death, it's for everyone else, but it's not for me. Death is not for me. I'm here, I'm meant to be here forever. Death is not for me. We hear of people dying, getting into car accidents, being diagnosed with cancer, but these things are always for others, not for me. I'm immortal. This is how we think. This is how foolish we are. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam fi khutbat al-muttaqeen, he describes the pious. He says, al-mu'min, and another sermon, he mentions it a couple of times. He says, al-mu'min nafsuhu minhu fi ta'ab, wal-nas minhu fi raha. A believer, his nafs is always tired. Is always tired. He makes sure that his nafs, which nafs? The evil kind. The undisciplined, the untamed nafs. Not the nafs that is tamed. Because a nafs, if it's tamed and disciplined, it will help us become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But a nafs that is not tamed and undisciplined, for a mu'min, his nafs is constantly tired. Why? Because from morning till night, his nafs tells him to disobey Allah, to break Allah's laws, to disobey Allah, to lie, to cheat, to fool others, to look at that which is haram, to say that which is haram, to listen to that which is haram. But a mu'min says, no, 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 no. A believer, his nafs tells him, why do you have to pray? Pray when people are watching you, but when you're by yourself, don't bother yourself. You don't need to waste your time. Are you crazy? You stand, you bow down, you prostrate. The nafs says, don't pray. When you're by yourself, don't pray. The mu'min says no. The nafs tells us when we're fasting in the month of Ramadan, when it's 18 hours, 19 hours, I don't know how it is here. I've been to some places, especially in Europe, the day is 19 hours. It's really a jihad to fast in those areas. Perhaps this person is by himself, the nafs says, have a bite. Go and eat. No one is watching you. I remember when I was in high school, I was driving to school, and I noticed that one of my friends is also driving to school. I pulled to see him, and it was during the month of Ramadan. He was having a snack. He's on the highway, he doesn't think anyone will see him. He was eating. And of course I rush so that he doesn't see me, so that he doesn't feel embarrassed. You're by yourself, the nafs says, go have a bite. Have something to eat. A lot of young ladies who wear hijab, I'm sure many of them, their nafs tells them, why? You're so young, why wear hijab at such a young age? Your whole life ahead of you. You're only 19, 20, 21, you're still young. Why cover that beauty? Why cover that beautiful hair that you have? Why cover that body of yours that you spend hours at the gym working for? Take off the hijab. The nafs comes again and again and again and again. You're at a store, no one's watching, the Nafs says, pick up a tomato or lipstick or whatever, put it in your pocket, no one sees. You go to a nice hotel, they have nice towels, the Nafs says, steal their towels. And so on and so forth. The Nafs comes back. The Nafs doesn't leave a person alone. Yet al-mu'min nafsuhu minhu fi ta'ah. He makes sure that his nafs, when he sleeps at night, his conscience is clear, yet his nafs is tired. Is tired from ordering him around to disobey Allah, yet he doesn't disobey. This is a mu'min. This is someone pious. That he makes sure that he overcomes his nafs, and not the other one. They say that there were two scholars. There were two scholars, and yes, even the best of us, even scholars, they also have a nafs. They also have a nafs. Al-nafs al-ammara bis-su'. No matter how great you become, you're not free from the danger of the nafs. If the nafs is not tamed, I was telling some of the brothers today and sisters that you could be a huge scholar, very knowledgeable scholar, but if you haven't worked on your nafs, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. There have been names mentioned in history. There was a man at the time of, after the lesser occultation of Imam al-Mahdi, al-Ghaybat al-Sughra. Al-Ghaybat al-Sughra, the lesser occultation, Imam al-Mahdi appointed 4 representatives. There was one, his name was Al-Shalmaghani. Al-Shalmaghani was maybe more knowledgeable than some of these 4. He expected the Imam to appoint him as one of his deputies. The Imam didn't appoint him. Why? He's not qualified. It's not all about knowledge, my dear brothers and sisters. It's not just knowledge. You could be extremely knowledgeable, but you have to work on your nafs. Al-Shalmaghani was very jealous of one of the men who was appointed by Al-Imam as a deputy. He was jealous of Al-Hossein ibn Ruh, who was the deputy of the Imam. He became so jealous and envious that he declared himself to be the Imam. Very knowledgeable, huge scholar, but his nafs was so untamed and undisciplined, he was so jealous and envious that he declared himself to be the Imam. And he lost. He could have entered heaven, he went to the bottom of hellfire because of his nafs. There were 2 scholars, they say, one more knowledgeable than the other. And the one who was less knowledgeable, he was jealous of the one that was more knowledgeable. Was extremely jealous of him, envious of him. One day, they were at a majlis, they were at a gathering, and they started debating on a fiqh issue. For example, is this halal or is that haram? So on and so forth. The one who was less knowledgeable, he kept on insisting on his opinion. The one who was more knowledgeable, he didn't insist. He said his opinion and he stopped. The one who was less knowledgeable, not only did he insist, but he even insulted the other scholar. He told him, I'm shocked. People call you a scholar. People say that you're knowledgeable. I don't see any knowledge in you. And this was a very big insult. They say that the one who was more knowledgeable, he got up at the majlis. He went to the other scholar in front of everyone. He grabbed his hand and he kissed him. He embraced his hand. And then he left the majlis. His students, his people with him, they came out, they told him, what did you do? This person insulted you. Yet you come up and you kiss his hand? Why did you do this? He said, you know why? He said, because when he insulted me, my nafs says insult him back. It said insult him back. And I could have easily insulted him. My nafs told me seek revenge and humiliate him the same way he humiliated you. And then I thought that this nafs is telling me to do something to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I thought of punishing this nafs. This nafs that wants me to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it deserves a punishment. How do I punish my nafs? I humiliate it by going and kissing the other man's hand. How many of us could do this? How many of us could do this? We're insulted day in and day out. I'm sure that every once in a while we hear words that are harsh, that put us down. All of us, men, women, boys, girls. We hear words that put us down. But how many of us can truly do this? If one of us, I speak for myself, someone humiliates me, I'll return the one insult with 16 other insults. This is what we usually do. If someone swears at us once, God knows what we'll say. How many of us just, you don't have to go and kiss the other person's hand. How many of us just remain silent? This requires a huge nafs. A person who's worked hard on his nafs, he could do it. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, one day he was passing by a group of youth that were trying to pick up a huge rock. They were trying to pick up a huge rock. He saw some of them, they could, some of them can't. Some of them pick it up halfway, some of them pick it up all the way. Rasulullah applauded them. He said, this is good. He saw one of the youth, he picked up the rock and he put it over his shoulders. He applauded him, he clapped for him. He said, this is good. But don't think you're the strongest. There's someone who's stronger than you. There's someone who's stronger than you. He said, who? He said, the one that can overcome his nafs. This person is stronger than you. Not the one that can pick up a rock. Anyone could go, work at a gym, spend endless hours at a gym, build up huge muscles and a huge biceps, like myself, if you could tell, and pick up the largest rock. This is not a big deal. The big deal is someone, no matter how skinny and scrawny he is, but he can overcome his nafs. This person is stronger than the nafs. He's stronger than the other, because he overcame this enemy. أعدى عدوك نفسك الذي بين جنبك. In a hadith, that your greatest enemy is not your mother-in-law, and it's not your daughter-in-law. Your greatest enemy is right here, inside. نفسك الذي بين جنبك. Our greatest enemy is right here inside, this nafs that drags us to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everyone knows the famous story. Everyone, I'm sure everyone has heard the famous story when the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam returned from the battle of Tabuk. They came back. What did Rasulullah tell them? لَقَدْ رَجَعْتُم مِّنَ الْجِهَادِ الْأَصْغَرِ وَعَلَيْكُمْ بِالْجِهَادِ الْأَكْبَرِ. Truly this is the greatest jihad. And again, I speak for myself first. Have I overcome my nafs? Have I tamed and disciplined my nafs? الْمُؤْمِنْ نَفْسُهُ مِنْهُ فِي تَعَبٍ. This is the greatest quality of a believer. And he can control his nafs. He controls his tongue. He doesn't hurt his tongue. He doesn't hurt people with his tongue. There are some people that are abusive. That are very abusive, but not with their hands. They don't carry a cane, go around hitting people. But they're abusive with their tongues. They hurt people. Our tongues can be very damaging, my dear brothers and sisters. And this is the worst kind of people. The ones who hurt others. You see, sometimes if we make a sin, it's between me and Allah. For example, I listen to music. Listening to music is haram. But I'm not hurting someone. Perhaps Allah will forgive me. If I look at something that is haram, or I lie, this is a sin. But perhaps Allah will forgive me because it's between me and Him. But sometimes I make a sin and I hurt others. Sometimes we hurt others with our tongue. This is the greatest sin of all, when we hurt others. Allah will say, you want me to forgive you? Go and seek forgiveness from that person first, and then come to me. Amir al-Mu'minin says, Al-Mu'min nafsuhu minhu fi ta'ab wal-nas minhu fi raha. A believer, people don't have to worry. What is this person going to say about me? How is this person going to gossip about me? How is this person going to accuse me? Is this a believer who goes around accusing others, gossiping around others, saying ghibah? This is not a mu'min. This is not a mu'min, a person who can't control his tongue. Some people, their tongues are more poisonous than a scorpion, than a snake. I swear to God. It all goes back to our nafs. What have we done for our nafs? Have we worked on it? Or we haven't? Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, in his munajat al-Shakeen. And I'd like to read you some of this and we'll conclude. As we conclude, let's turn our hearts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's see what Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam says. Imam Zayn al-Abidin has munajat, 15 munajat. Treasure. Indeed it's treasure. But most of us, we haven't discovered this treasure. Many people have not even heard of this munajat. They've never picked it up and read. I'd like to read you some of the munajat of Imam Zayn al-Abidin regarding al-nafs. إلهي إليك أشكو نفسا بالسوء أمارا وإلى الخطيئة مبادرا وبمعاصيك مولعا ولسخطك متعرضا تسلك بي مسالك المهالك وتجعلني عندك أهون هالك كثيرة العلل طويلة الأمل إن مسها الشر تجزع وإن مسها الخير تمنع ميالة إلى اللعب واللهو مملوءة بالغفلة والسهو مولاي يا مولاي مولاي يا مولاي مولاي يا مولاي. My dear brothers and sisters, the past 5 nights that have passed have been a very enjoyable experience for myself. They pass by very quickly, yet their memory will last for a while. I'd like to thank this wonderful community, this beautiful community, who has some of the nicest people that I've met in my life. I'd like to thank the organizers who invited me to come from Iraq to join you. I thank the organizers. I thank my dear sister Abbas and her husband Abu Abbas and all the brothers and sisters who have been very kind and hospitable, who have hosted me for the past couple of days. The youth that are here are extremely energetic, they're very enthusiastic. I can tell that they'd like to learn, they like to uplift their spirit, and inshallah this will happen. However, what I'd like to say, my dear brothers and sisters, that you have a major responsibility. You have a huge obligation. Here in this community in Perth, you don't have other Islamic centers. This is your only place. I heard the stories, I've heard the atrocities and the tragedies that have occurred in this community, the previous centers and the shutdowns. Believe me, I probably heard the story 10 times already. I've memorized the story. Yet, what's next? What will you do? I know all of you, you're upset. You're upset that you don't have a center. You're upset that the community is divided. I know that you're all upset, but being upset by yourself won't help. What helps is action. What will you do about it? Sitting and complaining to your visitors, it's good. But what's next? Complaining by itself and nagging won't help, my dear friends. You have to take action. Enough complaining. Let's start working. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you a beautiful center. This center is a beautiful center. Look how the community is here. Even though this is probably 1/4 of the community. The community is a lot bigger. Yet some people are here. The audience now, it's a good audience, it's a good crowd. And it could become bigger. Your youth can come and learn. My dear brothers and sisters, you need a center. You have to have a center. The same way you need a hospital and you need a grocery store, having a center in your community is a must. A community this size, it has to have a center. You have to have a place of worship, a place when you come and you learn, your youth learn. Perhaps not the older generation. The older generation might say, we've learned and we don't need it. What about your youth? Your youth that probably don't speak their native language. They don't speak Arabic or Farsi or Urdu or wherever country you come from. They don't speak their language. Sooner or later they will forget their language, they will forget their religion, they will forget their heritage. You need a center for your youth to come and learn. Keep this place alive, my dear brothers and sisters. Don't let it shut down. It's a shame, it's a great shame that this place has to be shut down because of lack of financial support. It's a shame. I know that you can afford it. I'm sure you can afford it. You can afford to keep this place alive. Don't let a day come in which you have to shut it because of lack of funds. You can all afford it. You can all afford it. Don't expect others to come and support. Let me be honest with you. Don't expect Marja' X or Marja' Y to come and support this place. Because no one will care for you more than yourself. If you have to pay your mortgage, is your neighbor going to come and pay your mortgage? Or your cousin who lives in Iraq or Tehran, are they going to pay your mortgage? Who pays for your mortgage? You have to do it. Who pays for your loans? You have to do it. Don't expect others to worry about you more than yourself. Don't look for others, for other communities or other rich people in another country or other maraja. Now, should they support or not, that's another story. But you should care for yourself. You should care for your community. You should care for your center. The center is for you. If you keep the center alive, working, and active, you will see the benefit, not anyone else. People in Sydney won't care. People in Melbourne won't care. The people who will benefit is whom? The people in Perth. That's why the people in Perth should support it, not anyone else. You're benefiting yourself. And ahsantum, ahsantum. If you keep the center alive, it's good for you, it's good for your children. There's so many children out here, mashallah. Where will they go? If you don't have this center, where will they go? And you want them to be raised in a proper Islamic manner? Where will they go? if you don't keep this place alive, if you don't keep this place active, if you don't bring someone, a religious scholar who speaks fluent English and Arabic and Farsi to remain here. But mainly English, because English is what collects the community, because everyone speaks English. You have to do this for yourself. You have to worry about yourself. Don't think someone else will come and say, here's $200,000, build a mosque for yourself. No one will do this. Be realistic. Feel the responsibility, my dear brothers and sisters. Feel the responsibility. كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. You're all responsible. Don't throw the responsibility on others. We'll let them take care of it. I don't need to do this. No, you're all responsible. What I ask you, my dear friends, is to put your hands in your pockets and take something out and give to the center. It's a shame that next month or the month after that will come and there's no money to pay off the rent or to pay off the lease. You do it. You take the initiative. Feel responsible. Consider this place yours. It's for your children. It's for your youth. It benefits you. And I make a promise on my behalf. I pledge that I will come back to this community, inshallah. Even though I am no one and I have no value, but I promise to come back, inshallah. I will come back, possibly next year for Fatimiyya. Before, after, I don't know, but I promise to come back. And I will keep my relationship with this beautiful community. I will come back and I will work on my part to speak to other speakers, fluent English speakers, to come to this community and to serve you and benefit you. I will do that on my behalf. But you have to promise me that this place remains open and alive. You keep it open and we will help you as well. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. As we conclude these nights, this series of 5 nights about Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, the last couple of nights we shed our tears for Fatima al-Zahra. And we cry for Fatima al-Zahra because it's a tragedy. The tragedy of Fatima is a big tragedy. What the companions of Rasulullah did to Fatima, it was not small, it was not little. They hurt Fatima al-Zahra. We recited her tragedy and we mentioned her musibah and we shed tears. But there was one other tragedy. The tragedy of Fatima al-Zahra were many. But tonight, I'd like to recite to you another tragedy that was very sad upon the heart of Fatima al-Zahra. It was a very sad tragedy. And that tragedy was the tragedy of Karbala. Tonight, my dear friends, the past couple of nights our hearts were in Medina, but tonight I'd like to take you to Karbala. Let's go and visit Karbala tonight. Not with our bodies, but with our hearts and emotions and minds. Because the tragedy of Karbala was a major tragedy upon the heart of Fatima al-Zahra. She knew about the tragedy. She knew about the massacre of her children in Karbala. Al-Allam al-Majlisi says that one night I had a dream that I was sitting on a mimbar and thousands were listening to me. Thousands were listening to my lecture. Towards the end of my lecture, I saw a group of people stand at the door welcoming someone special. Everyone stand and they greeted that person. When that person sat down, someone came and told me that Fatima al-Zahra has entered the majlis. He said, I welcomed Fatima al-Zahra. He said, towards the end of my lecture, Fatima al-Zahra sent me a messenger. The messenger said, Ya Shaykh, Fatima al-Zahra requests that you recite Musibat al-Wada, the tragedy of the farewell, tonight. He said, but I don't know the Musibat al-Wada. I have not memorized it. He said, Fatima al-Zahra insists that tonight you recite Musibat al-Wada, the tragedy of the farewell. the farewell between Sayyidah Zainab and Imam al-Hussein. Recite it, she wants to hear it, she wants to cry. Shaykh al-Majlisi says, okay. Her request is a command, I obey her command. Shaykh al-Majlisi began reciting Musibat al-Wada'. When Imam Hussein alayhi salam saw that, he looked to his right, he looked to his left. He saw that all of his companions were dead. All of them were either they had all lost their lives, either with a spear or an arrow or by the sword. He looked to the camp of his women and children and he began to recite, Ya Zainab wa ya Kulthum wa ya Sukaina wa ya Ruqayya wa ya Rabab alaykunna minni salam فهذا آخر الاجتماع. My sisters, my daughters, peace be upon you. This is the last time that we meet. The next time we meet will be in paradise. And then the Imam put on his armor and he carried his sword. He said, أي أخت تقدم لأخيها جواد المني. He said, who will grab me? Who will give me my horse? Who will bring me my horse? His sister Zainab brings the horse. And she says, أي أخت تقدم لأخيها جواد المني. Which sister is cold-hearted, who will bring the horse of death to her own brother? Aba Abdullah rides the horse, he turns towards the battlefield. As he's about to enter the battlefield, he hears a faint voice shouting him from behind. مهلا مهلا يا ابن الزهراء. Everyone with Zainab. مهلا مهلا يا ابن الزهراء. He looks behind and he sees it's his sister Zainab. My dear sister Zainab, what do you want? She says, أخي أبا عبد الله انزل من على ظهر جوادك. My dear brother, come down from your horse. I have one last request to ask from you. As she approaches him, she tells him, أخي أبا عبد الله اكشف لي عن صدرك وعن نحرك. My dear brother, expose your chest and expose your neck. As he does so, she comes close to him and she embraces him on his chest and she embraces him on his neck. And then she turns towards Medina and she says, my dear mother, I did exactly like you told me. Imam Hussein says, my dear sister Zainab, you're breaking my heart. What is this that you're doing? She says, on the final day of my mother's life, my mother Fatima, she said, you will see your brother on a very lonely day, when he will be all alone without any supporters, without any brothers. Go to him, embrace him on his chest and on his neck, and tell him this is from your mother Fatima. As Shaykh al-Majlisi was reciting this story, all of a sudden the messenger comes to him and he says, Ya Shaykh, stop reciting. Fatima al-Zahra has fallen, has fainted. خويا خويا أنا بعيني لباري لك عيالك. This is Sayyidah Zainab speaking to Imam Hussein. خويا أنا بعيني لبالي لك عيالك، وأنا بروحي لسجد لك أطفالك، والمايات لا يرضى بدالك، نروح كل احنا فدالك. لا يا تريدني انسى وابطل ناحي ونيني، خذ ذكراك من عقلي، خذ ذكراك